We recently got confirmation that the new Dragon Age is in the making. The game will be titled Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and if you have never played a Dragon Age game before, this title will mean absolutely nothing to you.
Lovely.
The Dragon Age series can, at least in my opinion, be a bit overwhelming. A lot of people played the first entry, Origins, when they were very young and never played the sequels. Others, like myself, never even heard about the series until Dragon Age Inquisition was released, and then played that one first without knowing anything about the other games. Dragon Age Origins is by many considered to be one of the best RPGs ever made, and a staple in BioWare's huge collection of games. It's one of those games that you not just play, but for a slight part becomes a part of your life. You attach to the world and its characters, and are continuously trying to overcome the challenges the world provides. Now, truth be told, it's not an insanely difficult series. We are not playing a Souls game or StarCraft or something, but in classic old RPG fashion, the game doesn't explain any of its mechanics very well. On top of that, if you truly have no clue what you're doing, this is not one of those games in which you can just wing it until the final boss. It's one of those games where your build starts off weak, and then when you reach certain abilities or a certain threshold, everything starts falling into place and you can start steamrolling through enemies. I thought I'd make a little guide for newcomers. I can imagine leading up to Dreadwolf, the Dragon Age series will often go on sale again, so there will be a lot of clueless people who have no idea what they're doing. This will probably be a pretty long video, so I will add timestamps so you can click around. On a side note, this guide is going to be for the absolute basics of the game. I will eventually make another video talking about combat tips and tricks, notorious boss fights that people struggle with, more advanced party setups, stuff like that. But this current video is for basic information. Also, my save files are heavily modded. Odds are your game is going to look and even play completely different when you first boot up the game. If you are interested, I will make a video on all of the mods I use. Last but not least, I will use gameplay mostly from the start of the game. After the prologue, you can kinda go wherever you please, so it's hard for me to say, alright, I'm showing gameplay up until this point, because that can differ a lot depending on who's playing the game. With that being said though, I will not use gameplay from boss fights or from areas that would spoil too much about the story. With all of that out of the way, let's start with an introduction to the series. Who are you playing as, and why are they even relevant?
Hey, you. Finally awake.
The world of Dragon Age is quite vast. If you would look at its world from a spaceship, it would kinda look like this. This is Thedas, the only known continent to this universe. Small references will be made to other mysterious places or unknown lands, however, we never get to see them or visit them. Parvalen, home to the Qunari race, and Saharan, home to the Fog Warriors, are two places that come to mind. Dragon Age Origins in its entirety will take place in this region of Thedas. Zoomed in, it looks like this. This region is called Ferelden. This is also the map screen you will see in game. You use this to travel between the major points of interest. At the start of Origins, Ferelden is not at war with anybody. Something that is very important to know though, which the game, in my opinion, could have put a bit more emphasis on, is that Ferelden has quite recently ended a brutal war with Orlais. Ferelden was invaded by Orlais in 824 from the Blessed Age. For all intents and purposes, you only have to know the Dragon Age universe divided its centuries into so-called ages. An age technically lasts 99 years, after which a new age begins. So, for example, 1:15 of the Divine Age would mean the 15th day of the first Divine Age. All civilized races living here are the humans, the elves, and the dwarfs. The human citizens can very easily be compared to, at least in my opinion, European countries throughout the ages. Antifa resembles Italy or Spain, Orlais France, Ferelden has many similarities to the old British Empire, etc. The elves were the dominant race in Ferelden until the Tevinter Empire almost destroyed them, after which the remaining elves ended up living in human city slums or withdrew to the Brazilian forest. This is not the only forest they travel to, but it is the most popular one. The dwarfs all live in Orzammar, with the exception of the ones who have been cast out or choose to live a life outside of city walls. Going back to the invasion of Ferelden, this war lasted from 824 Blessed until the start of the Dragon Age, which is why the game is called Dragon Age. Many people often wonder why the series is called Dragon Age in the first place, so now you immediately know why. The entirety of the first book in the series, Dragon Age: The Stolen Throne, is dedicated to the final dozens of years of this war. I highly recommend reading it if you want to get a better grip of who these people are and why so many characters in Dragon Age Origins absolutely hate the Orlesians. The reason I mentioned I personally think it wasn't portrayed well enough in the game is that there are a lot of characters who fought during this war and also have a deep hatred for the Orlesians. However, in my opinion, those characters slightly got brushed aside as the game pushes you more into the direction that we have to work together and forget about past diplomatic issues so that we can fight a common threat. This, however, is slightly subjective and maybe a topic for another video. That common threat, however, is a so-called blight. A blight starts off when darkspawn discover one of the old gods, and taint said god with their darkspawn corruption. Darkspawn are essentially sort of the demons of this world, and until this point, the closest thing Thedas has found to fight these creatures are the Grey Wardens. This is also where your story will start off, as you will be playing as one of these wardens. The game does a pretty excellent job at explaining what you're going to be doing, who your fellow wardens are, etc. It's also kind of difficult to talk about them without spoiling the entire first couple of hours of the game, so yeah, I will not be doing that. But now that we're on the subject of who you're playing as anyways, this is the character creation screen. It's pretty self-explanatory, but the race and background you choose will have a major impact on the way your story unfolds. Every race also gets slight bonuses that others will not have. Humans get a plus point in dexterity, dwarves in strength, etc. None of the backgrounds are necessarily better than some others are. Your race and background decide what your prologue is going to look like. Some are more fun, some a bit longer or shorter than others, but all in all, they're pretty great. All of them do a pretty good job at setting up the scenery and who you are, except for maybe the Dalish elves. Again, same thing goes, it's definitely not bad, there just aren't a lot of characters in this prologue who return later in the game, and there's not a whole lot of mentioning of what the world looks like. They're in a pretty secluded part of the game, but we'll get to that later. My personal recommendation would be to play as an elven mage. There are two reasons for this. The first one I already kinda touched upon, but it's that elves in the Dragon Age universe are a long lost race. They were once mighty and stood above the others, but throughout the centuries have fallen until the point where they have now either completely withdrawn from civilization or live in the slums that I mentioned before. This means that wherever you go, people will remark on the fact that you are indeed, believe it or not, an elf. This opens up a crap ton of new dialogue options and also a lot of different ways to roleplay the game. Will you be forgiving towards racist dwarves and humans as they know no better, or ruthless towards them and take your vengeance out on them? The choice is yours. Now, for the second reason, the mage part. The way the game plays out, or actually the way your party setup is going to look like, is that you will get a lot of warriors, some rogues, and 2 mages as available options to recruit into your following. This is for the base game, not the DLC. One of those mages is an excellent healer, and the other one starts off kind of bad. She will have some good offensive spells, but if you build her in a wrong way, she's just going to be a mixture of random stuff that won't really cut it in most scenarios. I think it's best for the main character to fill up that role as a damage dealing or second supporting mage in the party. As a bonus reason, you will spend most of your time fighting pretty far away from the actual fighting. Mages are considered to be incredibly strong in Origins, so while you stand at a safe distance, hurling plagues and last night's weather forecast towards your enemies, your warriors can get their hands dirty. These are just my recommendations though. You should play the game however you please. So, let's talk about how to actually set up your character and the gameplay in general. I would start off by playing on normal difficulty. Why? Because as in most games, higher difficulty doesn't mean a smarter AI, it just means your attacks do less damage, your healing spells are less effective, the enemy gets a ton of buffs and extra perks that make them stronger. All in all, it's just not very balanced. On top of that, Origins suffers from heavy difficulty spikes. You can breeze through hordes of darkspawn only to then cut a corner and get slaughtered for 2 hours straight by a group of homeless bandits. On the other side of the coin, easy difficulty will make sure it doesn't really matter how you spend your skill points or how you set up your character, you will win everything no matter what anyways. That may seem like fun at the start, but it will easily make the game a whole lot less interesting by the time you're at the halfway point. It also means you won't really learn anything, so yeah. Normal difficulty. Attribute points can be put into the following categories: strength and dexterity, most important for warriors and rogues; willpower and magic, most important for mages; and cunning and constitution. Cunning decides how fast the character learns skills, while constitution decides how many hit points, or in other words, health, your character has. Strength increases how heavy you hit and makes sure you can put on the heaviest armors in the game. Dexterity increases your ability to hit and dodge attacks. You may wonder, hit? Yeah, you can miss attacks. As a matter of fact, that's pretty much all you're going to be doing at the start of the game. Willpower is a pretty bad choice of words in my opinion. You should see this more as a stamina meter for rogues and warriors and as a mana meter for mages. Every action will cost either stamina or mana, and the more of it you have, the more you can do. Magic makes your spell stronger, but it also increases how effective potions are on the character. I wouldn't worry too much about the last part, as that is primarily important for the first sections of the game. During the mid and end portion of the game, you will mostly use spells for this kind of stuff. The type of armor you can wear depends on the amount of attribute points you have. Nobody is stopping you from dumping all points into magic while your character is a warrior, but it wouldn't be very practical. Believe it or not, but constitution, aka health points, don't contribute too much to how long a character stays alive after taking damage. You are better off dumping all points into the attribute line that matches the character. So dexterity for a rogue, strength for a warrior, etc. This is because better armor vastly outshines having a lot of health. So maxing these stats out is more important than maxing out your vitality. Why? Because the attribute points have a direct connection between the class that needs them and the armor that's associated with it. A mage will wear armor that requires a certain amount of magic, a rogue armor that requires a certain amount of dexterity. Even though I would recommend anyone to just start off and experiment a bit, it does help if you beforehand at least have some sort of idea of what your party is going to look like. So I'm gonna do my best to explain on how to do that. For example, bringing 4 beefy warriors into a fight may seem like a good idea, but I can guarantee you it won't get very far into the game. A party setup of say 1 warrior with 1 rogue and 2 mages performs a lot better in the long run. This is because while everyone is hacking and slashing away at your poor warrior, the other members can damage the enemy, slowly dwindling down their numbers. If you have 4 warriors, you essentially just have 4 punching bags who slowly but surely will eventually all just die. Also take into consideration what I said before, that with low dexterity, your warriors are gonna miss a lot. So you not only have 4 punching bags, they also won't be able to hit anything themselves, which is just fantastic, as you can imagine. Every class obviously has stronger builds and weaker ones. It is hard to rank builds as, first of all, there aren't necessarily preset builds to just recreate. All of the builds on forums and on YouTube and stuff like that are things people threw together themselves and just gave a name. You can't say a 2-handed warrior is better than a sword and shield warrior, as they both have completely different roles. The same goes for blood mage and healing mage. It is, however, pretty easy to envision what your party is going to look like for it to make sense. Case in point, the warrior, rogue and 2 mages setup I mentioned before. As in most RPGs, there are plenty of solo builds that are just beyond broken, with which you can finish the entire game without any additional help from other party members. However, this requires a pretty deep understanding of the game and its mechanics. On top of that, this is a BioWare game, notorious for their amazing party members. The connection you create with them and the banter they have with you don't really want to miss out on that. To keep things simple for a first playthrough, try to refrain yourself from picking every ability that just sounds cool. If you are a mage who tries to keep your party members alive for as long as possible, spending 4 levels just to get to an ability in which you summon a cloud of leeching entropic energy that deals continuous spirit damage to all who enter, friendly fire possible, probably isn't going to be doing them much favors. Combat can be paused at every instance by pressing the spacebar, and you can assign hotkeys to use abilities faster instead of clicking on everything. Now that you know a bit about the world and how to ready yourself for combat, let's talk about the actual combat itself and what you should and really shouldn't be doing. You can micromanage every little detail about the combat as much as it pleases you. You do this by pressing the tactics button at the top, or the backward slash symbol on your keyboard, whenever you're not in combat. Here you can try and make your life easier by, for example, making sure that whenever your warrior drops below a certain amount of health, he activates a more defensive stance. Or whenever your rogue gets surrounded by a certain amount of enemies, your mage will buff him with a certain ability. If this is completely overwhelming, that's fine, as the game has preset options for you to choose from. These are honestly pretty good, especially if you have no clue what is what and how to set things up, etc. The presets also help the fact that you are maybe and possibly contradicting with what the AI is trying to do. While the AI is busy trying to distract enemies, you constantly switching to the character that has this task and pulling him away from combat may mess the flow of combat up. One-time abilities may sound cool, but they are exactly that, one-time abilities. An ability that permanently speeds up someone's attacks or makes someone invincible for the next couple of seconds works a lot more in your favor than raining down one ability that drains all of your stamina or mana. This is why, once again, it's pretty important to know what role you are going to be fulfilling in the party. An example. My rogue is slashing kind of blindly into this heap of enemies you see before you. However, these guys are barely doing anything to my warrior. You know who is messing him up though? They're archers, so you want to switch your aim to them, not these little bastards. Here I messed up and my tank and damage dealing mage died. But because I gave my supporting mage the ability to lay a trap whenever she gets attacked by melee damage, she managed to just about survive, avoiding that the entire party will get wiped. This type of stuff may sound like a no-brainer to some people, but it's easy to think, oh shit, he's about to die, so I gotta make sure that whatever's attacking him must die first. No. Every battle is about outlasting the enemy, not trying to slaughter them as fast as possible. There's absolutely no way I can put all possible party combinations into one video. However, now that you have some basic knowledge of how to put a party together and how to build your character, it's time to talk about what you probably shouldn't do while fighting your battles. Mistake number 1. Rushing into combat. If you hadn't guessed already, Origins is an RPG, a BioWare RPG, meaning you are the hero and everyone looks up to you to save the day. This may result in you letting it get to your head a bit and beelining directly into the enemy's assault line. Odds are, before you even make it there, you're already half dead, and now the rest of your party members are one man down. Let enemies come to you and use your rogues and mages to snipe enemies and stay at a safe distance. This is not Mass Effect, where you can just fly through hundreds of enemies using 30 different abilities non-stop. Origins has pretty slow combat and it's semi-technical, so try to keep that in mind. Mistake number 2, switching weapons after every fight. Throughout the playthrough, you will gather quite a bit of loot. A new sword here, a new dagger there. The thing is though, there aren't really any weapons that are perfect for every single fight. If you douse all of your weapons in flame damage and end up fighting, let's say, a dragon, it may not end up very well. There's a perfect moment for frost, flaming or telekinetic weapons, and the same goes for mauls, greatswords, daggers, bows. This is impossible to know beforehand, so keep 1 or maybe even 2 reserve weapons for every party member, so you don't end up with an entire party whose weapons do essentially 0 damage to the enemy you're currently fighting. It may seem tempting to sell everything that you don't use, but at the start of the game, even though you're gonna need gold, if you progress throughout the game and do some side content, you're eventually gonna be so rich it doesn't really matter anymore. Mistake number 3. Being too diverse with your skill tree. Skills are something you can choose besides your abilities and spells. These can range from making traps and poisons to pickpocketing and persuasion skills. While some are a lot better than others, there's no way you're going to max out on all of them in one playthrough. As a matter of fact, you probably won't even get close, excluding the DLC that is. You are far better off picking 2 or 3 categories to max out, while giving the one you prioritize less to one of your companions. If you play as an assassin, poison, traps and pickpocketing make a lot of sense, so try and keep things like herbalism and survival to your mages, as a rogue will barely use these skills. Mistake number 4. Trying to make every party member as overpowered as possible. This may sound kinda weird at first, but when you think about all of the things we already covered, it should make sense by now. Your party should complement each other. If you have a party with 3 major damage dealers, does your shield and sword warrior really need single-use abilities that barely do any damage? Probably not. You're far better off giving him abilities that make sure he stays alive as long as possible. It's very tempting to give your main character all these cool spells or talents that look flashy, but if you focus on this too much, you're essentially just a one-trick pony, being more of a nuisance than someone useful to the others. Mistake number 5. This is more of a bonus one, but rushing through the entire game. The story has that classic RPG issue that many others have faced before, in which the dialogue makes it seem like you're in a major rush and that if you don't hurry up, the world will fall apart, but that's simply just not true.
This evil will cover the world like a plague of locusts! Please, you're scaring the children! Better to slit their throats now than let them suffer at darkspawn hands!
The events are triggered by you doing certain story missions, so if you want to spend the first 20 hours doing every single side quest and activity to get a feel for the game, nobody is stopping you. The only area that gets lost is Lothering, the first area you can free roam in. So I would do as much as possible when you're there, visit every building, talk to everybody, do every mission you can find, etc. before continuing your adventure. Other than that, you can essentially go wherever you please at all times. I first played Dragon Age Origins in 2018, almost 10 years after its release, and it still turned out to be one of my favorite games of all time. Slap some mods on there and use a guide like mine and you're in for one of the best RPG experiences that are available to you right now. We have no clue of knowing if Dragon Age 4 is going to succeed, but even if it doesn't, the 3 games that are currently available are already, in my opinion, all must-plays if you like action RPGs. I hope this video helped. If you have any remarks or questions, leave them in the comments and I'll respond to you as quickly as I can. I will eventually also make a video like this for Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, so stick around if you're interested in those. I hope you have fun during your first playthrough. Thanks for watching.